Colour pencil sets can vary massively in price, with cheaper sets costing only a few pounds to more professional brands with pencil sets that cost hundreds. But are expensive pencil sets actually worth it? I'm going to put one of the cheapest and most expensive colour pencil sets to the test to see just how big of a difference there is between the cheap and luxury coloured pencils. Hey everyone, my name is Kirsty and my channel is all about helping you improve your drawing skills so that you can create art that you are really proud of. For this challenge, I'm going to be comparing the Crayola 24 set of colour pencils, which cost around £3.50, to the 20 set of Caran D'ache Luminance pencils, which retail for £50. So this means that the Crayola only cost about 14 pence per pencil, whereas the Caran D'ache actually cost a massive £2.50 per pencil, which is like 17 times more expensive than the Crayola. Let's take a closer look at these pencil sets. The Crayola pencil set just comes in a thin box, which means these pencils have very little protection to stop the pencil leads from actually breaking. The build quality of these pencils looks pretty decent. The wood casing at the end is exposed and so is the lead, but for this price you really can't expect much more, and the pencils do look fairly sturdy quality. The Caran D'ache comes in a much stronger box and has a foam insert that really helps protect each pencil from damage. The pencils straight away feel really high quality, the lead looks thicker and creamier, the wooden casing is thicker and smoother, and the end of each pencil is even nicely concealed with a cap of the colour of each pencil. One of the big reasons these pencils are so expensive is because of their light fastness. These pencils actually have the highest light fastness ratings possible, which basically mean that their colours won't fade over time. This is especially important if you are a professional artist that sells their art and you don't want the colours to get dull after just a couple of years. This is definitely one of the big reasons for the high cost of these pencils, but isn't necessary or important if you are a beginner just starting out practicing using coloured pencils. So this pencil set is definitely targeted towards more advanced coloured pencil artists. The first thing I did with both pencil sets is swatch the colours. To make this comparison fair, I will be using 20 pencils from the 24 Crayola set to match the size of the Luminance set. I will be really interested to see how these pencil sets perform against each other, because even though I've used both of these before, neither of them are the pencil set that I actually use for most of my colour pencil drawings. And if you do want to know the supplies I use to create my realistic colour pencil drawings, then I have got a free colour pencil supply guide that I will leave a link to at the top of the description. I go through the must-have supplies for anyone starting out with colour pencil drawing and some tips for choosing the best pencils, paper and everything else you need to get started with colour pencils on a budget. But anyway, let's start to get a feel for these pencils. I start by swatching the first half of the Crayola pencils, and the Crayolas definitely had a hard lead, which meant that it was easy to be more accurate with my colouring and stay within the borders of each box, but it also meant that it took a long time to fill in each swatch of colour. I also found that with the Crayolas I had to apply quite a lot of pressure to the pencils to create a heavy application of colour and to actually get the colours to look vibrant. I like to work using lots of light layers, so the fact that I had to apply lots of pressure to get an intense colour could be a problem. Now I am swatching the first half of the Caran D'ache pencils, and I tried to get as many matching colours as I could so that I had similar colours to work with from both sets. Swatching these pencils definitely felt a lot different to the Crayolas. The Luminance pencils were much creamier, so it was a lot quicker to lay down a smooth swatch of each colour, and I didn't have to apply a lot of pressure to get really vibrant colours and to fill in all of the paper surface and remove all of the graininess. One of the biggest differences I saw with the Caran D'ache swatches is the colours were really rich and they were actually a lot more vibrant and deeper in value than the Crayola pencils. It was definitely a lot harder to get dark colours with the Crayola pencils, but it was easy to achieve those intense colours with the Luminance. Now moving back to swatching the rest of the Crayolas, as I continued swatching, it became really clear that this set did lack darker colours. All of the pencils were very bright and more of a mid-tone value. Only the brown and black were dark in value. There wasn't anything like a dark blue or dark green. This pencil set just really didn't have the darker versions of each colour. But one thing that I did really like about this pencil set though was all of the colours felt the same when I laid them down on the paper. The quality of these pencils felt very consistent throughout the set, and I knew what to expect when I shaded with each pencil. Whereas with the Caran D'ache pencils, I found that there was more of an inconsistency to how the pencils laid down. Most of the pencils were really smooth and buttery to lay down, but others like the Manganese Violet, the Russet or Perylene Brown felt more scratchy, and the shading actually looked a bit more bitty and chunky rather than creating that smooth, even coverage that the other pencils did. Also, because the Luminance pencils are so soft, it was harder to be precise with these pencils and get really clean, crisp edges, which could cause problems if you want to add lots of fine details to your colour pencil drawings. Now, all of these swatches were done on white paper, but sometimes you might want to use toned paper or even black paper. So I thought it'd be useful to test how both these sets perform on different types of paper. When I swatched on the black paper, it became obvious the difference between these two pencil sets. The Crayola pencils just didn't show up very well at all, and the colours looked very dull, whereas the Luminance definitely were a lot more opaque and looked very vibrant on the black paper. Especially the white pencil, which really showed up well on the black compared to the Crayola white pencil. I also tested the pencils on toned tan paper. Now, the Crayolas did show up better than on the black paper, but they still didn't have that same colour payoff that was as good as the Luminance pencils, especially the white Crayola pencil. It just didn't show up very well at all. Next, before we dive into a full drawing, I wanted to do a few quick tests to get a feel for these pencil sets a bit more. First, I wanted to practice and experiment with shading with these pencils, and I'm not trying to be perfect with these drawing tests. This is just a way to get a feel for these pencils and learn more about what does and doesn't work with each pencil set. I practiced shading in a sphere with the Crayola pencils, and I like that I was easily able to achieve lighter versions of each colour just by reducing the amount of pressure I applied when shading. This can be harder to do with more expensive pencils that have such an intense colour payoff, even with less pressure. Now, the harder lead made it actually pretty easy to get smooth shading because the fine point was able to get into more crevices of the paper, and so I didn't actually get a very grainy result like softer pencil leads can give. Which is good because it means that I wouldn't always have to burnish everything out to get a smooth result. The shading can look smooth even when you just apply light applications of colour. Now, drawing the sphere with the Luminance pencils was a whole different experience. The pencils were faster to lay down and blended really easily to get a smooth result. These pencils definitely feel a lot like oil pastels to work with. They really are super smooth, which is nice if you are doing really smooth drawings with very little detail, but it could cause problems if you're trying to create more texture drawings, like drawing animal studies. Next, I wanted to test how easy it was to layer multiple colours together, and I found that both pencil sets did a really great job at this. Often when I draw skin, I have to layer lots of different colours, so I thought it would be good to test creating a skin colour with both pencil sets. I was really easily able to layer the Crayola pencils on top of each other. I layered yellow, red, brown and pink, and the colours just meshed together beautifully and created a really realistic skin tone. I even layered the white on top to blend the colours together a bit more, and the paper just took the Crayolas so well. The Caran D'ache also layered really easily together. I layered those same colours and achieved a similar result as the Crayolas. For realistic drawing, it's also really important to be able to gradient and transition between different colours seamlessly. So I wanted to create a colour gradient with each pencil set. I tried to create a gradient from green to blue to purple and found that both pencil sets really did perform very well. They created beautiful colour gradients, and I just couldn't see any issues with either set that would stop you from creating smooth colour transitions. Now, burnishing is the most common method of blending colour pencils, so it's very important that you can burnish easily with your pencil set. So first, let's burnish with the Crayolas. Burnishing is just applying more pressure to your pencils to blend and mesh previous layers of colours together to achieve a smooth final colour, without any of the paper grain showing through. The Crayola pencils burnished to create a really smooth final result, and all of the white grain of the paper was eliminated. But the white pencil wasn't very effective at blending, which could be a problem as often white is used to blend out and burnish colored pencils. Also, I found that when I burnished the darker areas, I ended up with more of a patchy result. The Caran D'ache pencils burnished really well and easily, just like we'd expect, because of those super soft cores. It just makes the luminance pencils perfectly designed for the burnishing technique. Now, the white pencil was really effective at burnishing as well, but the white pencil is so opaque that you can't really use it to burnish darker areas without washing out the colours too much. But personally, my favourite way to blend out coloured pencils is using Solvent Blend. So I wanted to test this out, and I started laying down some shading with the Crayola pencils, and then I used the solvent and a brush to blend out that shading. And the solvent was really easily able to blend out the Crayola pencils and remove all that graininess to give a really smooth, vibrant result. And after the solvent had dried, it was also really easy to add another layer of coloured pencils over the top. The solvent also blended the luminance pencils really easily too and made the colours look more vibrant and almost like a painting. It was so easy to layer other colours on top after the solvent had dried as well. Testing how effective the white pencils were really did show the difference between these two pencil sets. I was really disappointed with the white Crayola pencil. It just was really useless. It barely showed up. Whereas the luminance white was so impressive, it really easily showed up on both blending methods, and it was really opaque and it lightened up that first layer of shading so much. So whether you buy the luminance set or not, it could be worth just investing in that white pencil. And one of the final things I tested was the ability to create fine details with the pencils. The Crayola pencils held their sharp point really well and was able to draw in lots of fine details and crisp lines without the pencils going blunt or needing to be sharpened. But the luminance pencil was just so soft, and even though I was able to create some fine details, the soft lead was just wearing down so fast that I would definitely need to sharpen these pencils really often if I was doing detailed work. And sharpening pencils can be a headache in itself, so having pencils that sharpen easily is crucial. I tried sharpening the Crayola pencils and found that the wooden casing just really easily cracked and split if you weren't careful, and it just didn't feel smooth when I was sharpening the Crayolas at all. I could tell that I was sharpening cheap pencils. In order to actually get a good point on these pencils, I'd need to use a higher, more expensive pencil sharpener rather than a handheld one, because they're just so temperamental that you can't really use a handheld sharpener like this one. The Luminance pencils, on the other hand, were just really easily able to sharpen, even using a cheap sharpener. The wood felt smooth and the pencil didn't break and actually sharpened to a very sharp point. These tests definitely revealed a lot of pros and cons for each pencil set, but just how well will the sets perform when used for a full drawing? Let's find out. For this final drawing, I'm going to work on a portrait, and I've actually drawn a line down the middle of her face so that I can colour the left side with Crayola and the right side with Caran D'ache. I thought it would be really fun to be able to actually directly compare the coloured pencils in one drawing to see if I could make it look like one consistent artwork that has just been done with one set of coloured pencils. I'm going to start by drawing the left side with my cheap Crayola pencils. I'm working on building up the skin tone first by overlapping lots of light layers of yellow, red and brown. I definitely found working with the Crayolas very relaxing. They layered really well and weren't too soft, so I actually did feel like I had a lot of control over how the shading turned out. And I was really happy that I was able to get the brown shading as dark as it needed to be to match the reference, because in the test the values of the Crayola pencils were a bit light in comparison to the Caran D'ache. Now the left side of the reference is actually more shadowed than the right, so this made it even more challenging for the Crayola pencils, but I was just so pleased with how the Crayolas worked in this drawing. Now I'm going to take a break from drawing the skin and actually start to add a bit more definition and detail to the facial features, like the eyebrow hairs and shadows on the lips. Once again, the Crayolas worked really well for the details because they have such a hard lead. I didn't have any problems with fuzzy edges and all of the details looked really crisp and sharp, and I hardly ever had to sharpen the Crayola pencils. Once I did the eyes, I realised I needed to go darker with some of the shadows, especially the shadows around the eye. So I used my brown pencil with more pressure and started to actually burnish the shadow areas of the skin to create a smoother result. I even managed to add a few more layers of yellow, orange and red to increase the vibrancy of the skin, as it was looking a bit dull, and I was just so surprised at how many layers of Crayola I could add to the paper. And with each layer, the shading was starting to look smoother and smoother. I then used the white pencil to burnish out the rest of the skin, and I had to press really hard on the white to get it to work at all. But it did do a nice job at smoothing out the grainy shading and did produce a realistic looking skin texture. Because the white pencil isn't very opaque at all, it really didn't change the colours much, and it kind of acted more like a colourless blender, which worked really nicely for this section of skin that was a darker value, but wouldn't be very helpful if you wanted to use the white to lighten your shading or to add highlights. Once I was happy with the skin, I added in the eyelashes using the black pencil and found that the black was able to achieve a really dark value and create a nice level of contrast in the face. I also used the black and brown pencil to fill in the hair and add some loose bits of hair over the face and by the ear, and that finished off the face for this drawing. So the final thing I wanted to work on was the flower crown, and there was a lot of intricate detail in the flower crown, so I decided to take it slow and start off by using my brown pencil to create a value sketch to make it easier to see where the light and dark areas of each petal were. It was definitely really easy to create light and darker values of brown just by adjusting the pressure I was adding to the pencil. For the really dark shadows, I did use the black. It would have been nice to have some other darker tone pencils to use for those dark areas, but because of the limited dark colours in the Crayola set, I had to use brown and black to darken all of the colours. Next, I layered some light pink, deep red and even purple to start to make the flowers look more 3D and give them more of an accurate colour. I found it hard to make the black shading for the shadows look natural, even though I did layer deeper reds and purples over the top. And it was definitely easier to do the yellow flowers because the yellow, orange and brown work together really nicely to create those different values for the flowers. I filled in the green leaves and then used the white pencil to burnish the lighter areas of the flowers. I think this drawing definitely shows that you can create really realistic looking drawings with even cheap supplies, and that you shouldn't let your cheap supplies limit you, because what is more important is your skill, not your materials. If you practice drawing with colour pencils and get confident with the different techniques, then you will be able to create really realistic drawings even if you don't have the best supplies. Okay, let's move on to the Caran d'Ache side, and I'm going to start in the exact same way by layering lots of different colours for the skin. The main difference I saw when using the luminance is that because they are so soft, the pencil lead wasn't able to easily get into the tiny nooks and crannies of the paper like the Crayolas were. And so the first layers of shading actually did look quite grainy. I used the brown a lot to map out the shadows around the eye, the structures of the eye, and to block in the eyebrow. The right side of the face has a lot more light hitting it, so it just wasn't as dark and didn't have as many dark shadows. I also used the black to establish the really dark details like the nostrils and center part of the mouth, and could see that this black was a bit darker than the Crayola. Next, I filled in the colour of the iris, and because the pencils are so smooth, I was able to blend the colours together really easily and effortlessly, and when I used the white to blend, it was able to really lighten the shading and works great for adding highlights. I continued to layer more yellow to the skin, and I didn't really like how grainy the shading was looking, and that in order to get a smooth result, I would have to burnish the entire area. Now the shading would definitely look smoother if I was using a really smooth paper instead of a vellum paper, and that is the paper I would usually use for these luminance pencils. Next, I used the white to burnish out the skin, and it became clear that the two sides had very different skin tones and were not looking consistent at all. And so I continued to tweak the colours, layer and blend until the skin tones looked a lot more similar to the Crayola side. And this process just made it clear how flexible and workable the luminance pencils were. I was easily able to add lots more layers of colours even after burnishing the entire skin. I was then able to burnish the area again and still get a smooth result. It definitely felt like I had more room for mistakes with the luminance pencils compared to the Crayola, and this did make the process very enjoyable and relaxing. After finishing the skin, I moved on to working on the facial features. The Caran d'Ache pencils were able to get the details I needed, but it was harder, and I definitely had to be more careful if I wanted fine details like eyebrow hairs and eyelashes. The white pencil was really great for adding texture to the lips as well, like the little creases and the shiny areas on the lips. I filled in the hair in the exact same way as I did with the Crayola pencils, but found that the luminance black looked darker and the shading was a bit more of a solid colour and not as patchy when I used the Caran d'Ache pencils. And I was easily able to add the tiny individual hairs onto the skin with the Caran d'Ache. And I think it was definitely easier to add crisp details on top of a burnished layer of shading than when I used the pencils directly on blank paper. Finally, I'm working on the flower crown in the same way as I did with the Crayola pencils, but found that this side turned out way better because the colours looked more natural and the black and brown was able to actually blend with other colours more seamlessly. Also, the white is so opaque that it was brilliant for adding tiny highlights to the flowers. I'd even say that the reason the flowers and skin turned out so well with these pencils is mainly due to the white pencil. It really gives the flowers an airbrush look after blending, and you can easily add more colours over the top of the white to add more vibrancy or deepen the shadows. The flexibility, colour intensity and blendability of these pencils really do set it apart from the Crayolas. And another thing that my husband actually noticed is that you can clearly see where these two pencil sets were used, because when you turn them to the side, you can clearly see the difference between the shine that is produced from these two pencil sets. The Crayola side is really shiny, but the Caran d'Ache has hardly any shine, which is definitely a positive of the Luminance pencils. But overall, you can see from the final drawing that you can't tell that this drawing was done with two different pencil sets, which really does go to show that you can get great results with any pencil set you want. And to be honest, I equally enjoyed working with both of these pencil sets, and it was nice that they both had pros and cons and worked well for different things. But like I said earlier, neither of these pencil sets are what I use for most of my colour pencil works. So if you do want to know what my favourite all-round pencil set is, then remember to check out my free colour pencil supply guide, where you can find out all of the supplies I recommend for getting started with colour pencils on a budget. You can find a link to that free guide at the top of the description, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye everybody.